welcome to another edition of Arts and Ideas. I'm Sue Swinand, and my guest today is a contemporary mixed media textile artist, Kirsch, who is also a psychologist or a social worker, and she has a degree in psychology from the University of Massachusetts and a master's from BU. So she does that on the side, and I want to thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
I'm very excited because we haven't had someone who does surface design before, and Catherine is going to tell us all about surface design, which I don't know too much about. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot. I know you completed a program in San Antonio, Texas. So how long ago did you get into this?
I took the course. I started the course in 2009, which is a 2.5-year program, which I did for till the middle of 2011, and it involved 6 months of study at home with assignments, and then a trip to San Antonio for a week, where I, did critiques and learned new things.
And this was all people doing textile
Doing
studies?
the same thing.
Yes.
Making art cloth.
Art cloth.
Yes. And so we learned different kinds of treatments for the cloth.
And who was the person teaching that program?
Jane Dunewald.
Jane Dunewald. And I'd like to tell the audience, we were looking at her book.
She has several books. She started out by writing a book in about 1996 called Complex Cloth, which was her name for the idea of doing lots of steps to a piece of cloth and making it art by itself.
So the cloth itself is the work of art.
Right.
How would you define surface design?
It's the process of adding patterning and other techniques to a piece of cloth.
Or images, I would imagine.
Images, right, to a piece of cloth, as compared to the idea of creating a cloth, as in weaving or felting or knitting. There you actually construct the cloth. The processes that are involved in surface design are done on a piece of cloth that's already been created.
Mm-hmm. So you're enhancing the cloth in some way.
Yes.
Now, would that include embroidery and things like that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It would include, it includes dyeing the cloth, using paint on the cloth, embroidering on the cloth. You can monoprint on cloth. You can use wax on cloth. You can use all kinds of resists on cloth.
Applique.
Applique on cloth.
Which is sewing on little pieces of fabric, right? Or,
yeah, or big pieces.
Yes.
But what it is, it's attaching a piece of fabric to another fabric.
Too, yeah.
Right. I've been sewing all my life. I started sewing probably when I was about 8 years old, and sort of had a sort of traditional progression of making aprons by hand and then learning how to use the sewing machine.
The pot holders.
Pot holders. I made lots of aprons. I made my own clothes.
And your grandmother, you said, taught you?
How to knit. She taught me how to knit. My mother taught me how to sew. Both of them were very good seamstresses and my mother...
And the nice thing about that we were talking about before is the way there's this sort of community or camaraderie of women who help each other and teach each other and have share this love of fabric. And
yes. Yeah, because I think that traditionally those skills have been in the woman's domain. It's not true in all cultures, because certainly in the Indian culture and the Japanese culture and the Chinese culture and African cultures, it's men who do the dyeing, for instance, and then that sort of thing.
Or the weaving too.
Yes, and the weaving. But there are lots of women who are involved in the technical aspects, the creative aspects as well.
It's kind of a cultural thing where the women are the ones who dress the family and have to make the garments and make the sheets and make the towels. And historically, the whole business of cloth was something that defined cultures
Right.
and defined civilization
Right.
as people became civilized and had cloth.
Right.
Cloth was
Right.
one of the
Cloth was a way to-
technological, the
Right.
technology of the day.
And it also is a way of identifying status. It's a way of, letting people know kind of where you fit in the society,
Yes.
depending on what you wear.
It's very revealing
it is
how
very
the
revealing.
fabric, you can see somebody wearing two different t-shirts, and one says everything because of the fabric and the way it hangs and the way
Right.
it's cut and the way
Yeah.
fashion is the whole story there. Today we're going to look at some of the things you've been making. What are some of the processes that you use when you're making these enhancements on fabric?
So I start by dyeing my pieces of fabric. And then I will use paint, such as this. This is fabric paint, specifically made for fabric, and it gets set with heat. And then I will stitch on it. I will foil on it. I keep my processes pretty narrow because you can get pretty lost easily if you start adding all kinds of things.
Too many notes.
Yeah. And I try to keep my focus is pretty narrow because my real interest is in color.
Okay.
And what happens when you put certain kinds of colors against, a certain background? What happens? How does it evolve? How do I create layers? How do I create dimension? And I try to do it in a very simple way.
What's kind of interesting to me, I was reading on her website, which is very interesting, by the way. She was talking about how color changes when you apply it to cloth, as opposed to applying it to a surface, to a different surface that's not as absorbent.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
very, very different.
Yeah, and it gets affected by
it can-
humidity, and it gets affected by how much light there is.
It also gets affected by the tooth of the fibers,
Yes.
though,
Yeah.
because I know when you have a rough surface, the color is not reflected back the same way. It's absorbed into
Yes.
the light is absorbbed into the
Yes.
into the texture of the fiber.
But and again, this depends. So, for instance, this piece of fabric here is a piece of silk broadcloth, and it has a luster to it. So it takes the dye differently. And,
Oh, sure.
And because of the luster, the light gets reflected.
And
definitely.
also, it's very white and tightly woven.
Linen has
I
a
would think
a
that would be
looser
more
weave,
absorbent.
and it absorbs more.
Yeah.
So it makes a more intense,
Yes,
saturated color.
yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting.
Some of your colors are so intense. I suppose that revolves around multiple. Are you doing more than one dye? There?
Yes, it's called overdying. So, for instance, in this piece, well, actually, this piece is only dyed once.
Now, what would this process be? I don't.
This is a Japanese shibori process.
shibori.
Okay, shibori is a process taking a piece of thread, and in this case, this is called mokume.
I'm gonna do like a blunt, but it's sort of like what you would think of as tie dyeing,
It is sort of like that.
but it's a little different. But the point is that
The
the
point is-
stitching and tying is
Right.
what creates the pattern.
Right. And in this one, you make a small running stitch, the length and width of the fabric.
So she's saying you would stitch a running stitch through this.
Correct,
And
and
then
make a
pull
gather.
the thread tight.
all the way down.
And you would do another row and another row and another
Right.
row and pull all the threads tight.
Right. And then the thread resists the dye. So the dye can't get through. So
Where
then
it's
you're
pulled
left.
tight and gathered very tight, the dye
Right.
doesn't go.
So you're left with these markings.
Beautiful, beautiful. And in a way, that's what this is going to be
Yes.
too, right? A shibori?
Yes. So this piece is using a different pattern, which will ultimately make a circle. It's
I want to show them this. It's almost like smocking.
It is, yes, exactly.
Because you're pulling the thread through and then gathering it tightly.
Yeah.
You can see the depth of this stitching on the back. And so then what happens?
So then I dip this in dye, and I will open it up, and I will have all these circles.
How big is this cloth?
This cloth is probably 36 inches.
So that's going to
yard.
open out like this.
Yeah.
And it's going to have these circular patterns
Right.
because of the way she stitched it.
And then I have the option to go back and stitch again and do another layer. So I will start with a light colored dye to make a light, so like yellow. And then I can go back and keep on adding layers on the piece.
That's the beautiful thing about fabric and color, is it absorbs color in repeated layers. So you sort of get like a vibration, or it's like putting one sheet of cellophane over another. You know, you see a new color because they combine in a chord of color instead of a monochrome.
Right. So it becomes almost transparent in a way. You can see the result. So if I make this yellow, and then I go back and I make more stitching and I add blue, in some places it'll be yellow, in some places it'll be blue, but in some places it'll be green.
Exactly.
And it'll be an unexpected green, not a
you know, when you say the word unexpected, that's one of my favorite things about making art, is the fact that there are surprises.
It's
and
lovely.
that you go and things showed up that you wouldn't have expected.
It's lovely. That's what I like about this.
And also the idea that process generates form.
Yes, it does.
Process, that you repeat a process, it generates a form that has a unity and, you know, keeps the image or the figuration consistent, but yet there are these wonderful little variations and surprises.
Right, which is, for me, I feel like there are sort of two ways to look at my work. You can look at my work from a distance, it's certainly got its appeal, but you can also look at it close up, and there are the details that are really beautiful. It's like the difference between seeing a beach full of shells and then going up and picking up one. It's different, and for me, the intimacy of seeing it close up is really moving.
So surface design is really, in your work, in your hands, a fine art.
I think of it that way.
Yes, I do also. And also, are you making these things to be used as garments or other utilitarian objects? They are for themselves to be appreciated aesthetically.
Right. You hang them on the wall. All right. So what I'm going to demonstrate here is the way that I create a dye bath. This bottle here contains chemical water, which is hot water, soda ash, and salt. And the idea is to help bind the dye to the fabric. And this is
so would this be a mordant?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always get confused about exactly what mordant does, but they're all different kinds.
Right. So I'm adding here 2 cups of chemical water, because my way of doing this is that I keep it simple. I use 1 cup per yard per teaspoon of dye to make the dye bath. Some people make it more complicated. My math isn't that good. So this is the dye stuff. Okay, I'm going to immediately add it to this, like so. Put the cover on. Put this in the sink. Put the lid back on.
Now that stuff is caustic as well.
Yeah, that's why I wear this. So now I'm taking this off. Whew, that feels better. Okay, so now I'm going to shake this to get
Is
all
that
of the...
enough dye to cover the...
Yes, because what I do is 1 cup of 1 teaspoon of dye per yard.
But I mean that little bit of water, are you going to fill more water in that?
No, I'm going to, now I've wet this piece of fabric.
That was the shibori that she had made the crinkle in.
Which I am now dumping in here. And I am now going to pour this and give this a good soak. Push it down, turn it over so that I can be sure that all of the dye has gotten into the fabric.
Well, she's got lots of these that you store these. They're like scrolls.
Yeah.
And then they're meant to be hung on the wall.
Yes, they are.
So let's show a couple of these. My, they're really long.
They're very long.
How
Some
long
of them
is this?
are. I'd say this one's probably. These are probably about 78, 90 inches long.
Wow.
But they're all about 14 to 16 inches wide.
Should I take this one to the side?
Yeah. So the story with this is that this is all, this was originally one piece of fabric, which I looked at and then ripped into thirds. And then said, okay, what am I going to do differently that would keep these pieces together, but each one be a different piece?
Again, it's that unity, variation, variety, repetition, all of the above.
Yeah. So
now these look like they were done by screening, is that correct?
that's right, silk screening. So this is a silk screen. The silk screen looks like this. So this is probably the silk screen I used, actually. Yeah, this is the silk screen I used.
So when she says silk screen, here, take that.
Yeah.
When she says silk screen, that's exactly what she means. It's a piece of silk stretched over a frame, and then her design, how are these put on? The stencils? Painted on?
Yeah, I painted these spots with house paint.
Okay, so what happens is they close the weave of the silk screen, of the open fiber of the silk, and so then what happens?
Only the paint gets through.
Okay, so then you would take paint, and I don't know how you do it.
Yep, that's
but
how
you
I
just,
do it. Yep.
She would squeeze this viscous paint onto the screen, and then using a tool like this, which has a rubber edge to it, and this would be flat, she would push the ink through the screen, and these little guys block the ink from going through.
Right.
And
it's paint. It's
paint.
fabric
say
paint. I don't use ink.
Right. Good point.
Okay. And then I go back and I take these. These are made with thermofax screens, which is that little itty bitty one right there. So that's a piece of plastic that gets a heated image put on it. Okay, and the plastic melts and leaves the image. And that's what I did. It's a different image that I used.
Now you said you could transfer images with the
fax.
fax.
Right.
So in other words, she can take a printed image and lay it on the thermofax. You had another one.
Yeah,
here.
right here. Here it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
And she can lay an image on the thermofax paper, and then here's the thermofax, and then you iron it?
No, you push it through the thermofax machine.
You push it through a heat machine,
Right.
and the image gets transferred onto the silk, onto the fiber.
Onto this fiber, which
Yes.
is actually plastic.
The fiber's in there. Okay, here's another screened
Yeah.
piece.
Well, this one's kind of interesting because this has spider shibori on it, on the back, in the
I
background.
love that.
Yeah, and then it's been printed. And now this gets a little more interesting because this was printed with print paste. This shape, this silk screen shape, that's like this.
Yeah.
This was printed not with paint, but with print paste, which is a substance that I make with dye and with algae, and you mix it up, and it makes a paste, and it sort of sinks into the cloth in a way that the paint doesn't.
So it gives a little different surface.
Yeah.
Ah.
And then I went back and I put these thermofax
Prints.
in
Yes,
it.
yes.
So this piece is small. It's made on silk habitai, which is a very
Non-absorbent? Thin?
Thin, yeah, it's kind of thin. Actually, that's not right. It's not silk habitat, it's silk broadcloth.
Oh, I love the little stitches.
So this is what happened with this one.
Can you see?
This is also shibori
So she
in the
tied
background,
these.
right?
Tied
And
those.
then I also folded these to make a grid. You can see this line is a grid.
So you fold it before you tie it. Is that right? Or
no.
was that a second process?
It's a second process.
Gotcha.
And then I decided to cut out all these shapes.
So these would be applique.
These are applique, yeah, they're
And
attached.
the
behind.
stitch itself is quite decorative and beautiful, the little yellow stitching.
Yeah, it's a cross stitch, which I love doing, and I take pride in making them perfect.
It's like using the one-haired brush.
You're right.
That's lovely. I see that you back these with felt
I do.
also. And what's the reason for that?
Well, it gives them some weight, and it makes it easy to send them along. Or,
They also keep perfectly smooth this
yes,
way.
they do.
They don't
yeah.
get wrinkled.
They don't get wrinkled. No.
And when you hang them, they hang perfectly, you know, they're not billowing and all that business.
Ideally, you know, I don't cut mine perfectly. I'm not concerned that they be totally straight. Some of these are not straight at all, and I don't really mind.
Again, it's to give it that handmade look
Right.
and not a machine-made
Right.
look.
Okay, so this is a piece that is 12 by 12. They started out as a series of sketches for me, sort of experimenting. And so these have all been dyed. I really love grids, so I'm continuing with the grid motif. But this grid I applied with glue and paper. And then I went back and put in some my Thermofax screens here. And this one I cut out. This one is
Look
a hole.
at the way the yellow string looks on top of the dark circle. That really, it gives like a golden glow to it almost.
So then I started thinking, okay, you know, I want to stitch. So I started stitching in different colors.
Now, did you stitch through the canvas or
No.
just through the
No,
fabric?
this has been
so
applied.
This was, I added, she mounted
Adhered,
this
yeah.
on a regular plain old canvas. And it really is like a painting in
Yeah,
cloth.
right.
I had other friends who say they're painters with thread or painters
Right,
with cloth. Or,
yeah.
I always tell my friend Mary Claire that she draws with the sewing machine.
She does.
Yes. So
She does. And this is another one, a similar concept, but here I used paper to make the oval shapes.
is this puffed out?
No, it
It
may
look-
because
I-
it looks at it.
Did you
it
ever
is.
think of puffing? So I noticed on
tried
some
it.
of the I saw another one that looked like the little circles had a little puff to them.
I've tried it, but you know, until I kind of master the process,
And this is sort of like cobwebs
yeah,
here.
that's all embroidery
Stitchery.
floss.
Yeah. Stitchery. And how is this
That is
godified?
a shibori. So that's
You dye those little dots?
no. So I took the first piece of this fabric and I did to it what this is, but I only made one circle.
Okay.
So I stitched it and then pulled it and then dyed it and then over dyed it. And when I over dyed it, it fell into these holes.
Unbelievable. I don't know if I can follow it, and I don't know if we should go there again, but
Okay.
it's very interesting.
Okay, I'm sorry I wasn't that clear.
No, I mean, it's a complicated,
complicated.
To envision.
Right.
It's fabulous, though. I love that one little geometric line there. That's a oh, no, you got another. Beautiful. There are little surprises everywhere.
Exactly. That goes
when
to
you
my
look
point.
up closely, there are little surprises
Exactly.
everywhere. This one I adore. Now, this one is not finished, so you get to see the back of it. She's going to mount this on.
I haven't decided how I'm going to finish
Hold it up flat so he
Oh
can
yeah,
see.
sure. So this is the back.
Yeah.
Okay. So the story about this one is that I made this beautiful grid and I thought I'm going to cut it up. So I cut it into thirds.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought that was a mistake. So I put it back together again.
But I love the seams.
And that's how I did it.
You
Yeah.
see, this is the way art happens. You never know what's going to come. And the best things happen when you have to solve a problem and do
Exactly.
something you didn't ever think of.
Right.
Because there was some little motivation that forced you to go somewhere new. Well, before we go, I just wondered if you're plugged into other people in this field.
I am not so much in Worcester, although I do belong to Arts Worcester, and I am starting a critique group.
Would this be just for surface design?
No, I actually would like it to be cross-media and give an opportunity for one of those things that we were talking about for sort of cross-pollination and
Yes.
having the idea that some of the things that I do could be applied to some of the things that other people do. And Arts Worcester has been very generous. They're going to offer us their gallery space when they're not having a show so that we can come in and have long and critiques and everybody can have space to hang their work. So I'm optimistic.
Sounds excellent.
Yeah, I'm enthusiastic. But in the meantime, I make connections with people sort of nationwide, and I belong to a group called Art Beyond the Surface. We are a group of artists who graduated from the mastery program, and we are interested in trying to sell our work.
And also the main thing, I suppose, where people could find out more about the field is through the Surface Design Association.
Right.
So is there anything else you want to add in?
Yeah, I'd like people to know that they can go to my website, which is KatherineKirsch.com.
It's a beauty, and you'll like it a lot. And I'm going to stop there and say thanks for joining us and hope to see you again next time.